and the Vice President of Sales at Accelerant. And we have Mary Grothe, the CEO of Sales BQ. All right, so.
Unlike these two, I was born saying, I am going to be a sales professional when I grow up, and that is a big joke. It is the accidental profession. I don't think there are many children, maybe unless they have a parent that's a crazy successful salesman or saleswoman that embodies that and brings that home and really cherishes it in their home environment. I don't know many children that say, that is what I'm going to be when I grow up. But for me, I was 22 years old. I was tired of working multiple part-time jobs, working till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I didn't have a college degree, but I found a staffing agency that said, go check out this sales admin position. And I knew nothing about it. I'll tell you one quick story. I'm very verbose. I'll keep it quick. I went in on my first day, picked up the phone on the fax machine. I didn't know what this thing was. I'm like, why is there a phone? You're not supposed to pick up that phone on the fax machine, by the way. I had never worked in an office. I didn't know anything, but I had a phenomenal sales mentor. And he took me under his wing, and I found out quickly, I'm like, I like this thing called sales, but I was an administrator, 13 bucks an hour. I worked my tail off. I did it for 2 years. I learned everything that I could. I was out in the field with the reps, and I decided I'm going to do this, and I did everything that I could to get promoted onto the mid-market sales team. I was 24 years old. I had worked during that time to get my degree while I was studying to go into this role. After 30 days, I became the #1 rep. In my first year, I sold more than number 2 and 3 combined on the list. I worked for a Fortune 1000 company. They had never seen numbers like this, and they didn't know what to do except to fly me out to corporate office and say, make this happen with other salespeople, please. And it was an incredible 5-year journey. I was the #1 rep, and in the second and third year, et cetera, as I was doing it, I took on more responsibility. I got to mentor and shadow reps and coach them in the field. I got to become a facilitator at the corporate sales training office, and my new passion was born. I said, I have to do this for the rest of my life. And I went out at a young age of 28 years old and decided I was going to start a company. And being that brave young entrepreneur, it was a hot mess for a few years, but we finally got it dialed in, and we've got a rocking and rolling company now. But we lead sales teams across the country. We have a team of fractional VPs of sales, and so as a CEO, I get to now impart my wisdom on my fractional VPs of sales that lead 4 or 5 sales teams apiece, and it is a dream come true to be in that level. Right, we call that desperation justification, and desperation justification comes across to them even worse than you think it does. People do not like being sold to. In fact, they hate it. And the one thing that you can focus on during your sales process, starting from when you prospect, is to not allow your prospect to feel like they're being sold to. You have to do this conversationally. You have to bring them value every step of the way. To your point, this is not selling, it is serving. People don't want to be sold to, but they do want their problem solved. So how are you choosing to show up to that conversation? Your specific question was, how do we remain cool, calm, and collected, especially in the final hours of a deal? Let me rewind earlier into the sales process, and I'm going to give you advice that's going to tee you up for that moment. Deals are won and lost in discovery. I didn't turn it off. I didn't do that. Can I trade you? What I mean by that is in discovery, you're going to find out these 4 things. If you're not finding these out in discovery, you shouldn't be at the closing table. Do you have a problem? Do they have a problem that you can solve? Can you walk out of that discovery and articulate and explain why they would do business with you, specific to you, not your industry, not companies like you specifically? What do you bring to the table that solves their problem? What problem are you solving? Number 2 is understanding how much that problem is costing them and what your quantifiable ROI is. Money creates emotion within people. And when you're at that closing table and they're concerned about price, they won't be when you've helped them do the math and you do the math with them and they understand what the problem is costing them today, what the cost of the problem will be in the future if they don't do anything now. And don't be afraid to magnify the cost of that problem based on how long it has been a problem for them. The third thing that you're going to uncover is timing. Like most problems you'll uncover with your prospects, they may have been occurring for some time now. Learn, ask, and understand why now. What have they done in the past to try to address or fix the problem? Why didn't they do it? Or maybe they did. What worked, what didn't work? Why are we here? Why now? What is the implication of the timeline that you're communicating to me? Because the best of us have received a commitment and a deal has not moved forward. And that is because there's no skin in the game, because we have not identified the implication of the timeline and gained agreement that that is the timeline that we're executing on. And the last part is to not be fooled by who the final decision maker is. It's 2019 and there are no sole decision makers anymore. It is a team game. Teams have never been stronger in organizations. Even if you're selling B2C and you're selling to a single consumer, the chances that a spouse or significant other or a family member has weight in that conversation and in the decision, it is true. And don't ever ask the question, are you the sole decision maker, or who besides yourself makes a decision? Because that's a prideful answer and it'll be just me, which is not the answer. You want to make it situational. The last time you bought a product or service like this, how was the decision made? How many people were involved in the conversation? Who gave the biggest pushback internally? Did this have to go to the board? Are we dealing with procurement? What is your wife going to think about this? What will that dinner conversation or lack thereof look like? Get in there and dig into it and qualify it. When you understand the reason that you're doing business, the problem that you're solving, and you understand the timeline and implication, then you understand the decision process. Make sure they have money carved out and set aside for this project. When you're at the closing table and you hear, gosh, that's more than I was hoping to spend, that's on you. Don't you dare put together a proposal until you have gained agreement that they're even willing to make an investment that matches what you are worth and what you are asking for. And my favorite thing is to ask this early and to get the gap, because rewind to finding quantifiable ROI. If you know that they've set aside $50,000 for your project and there is no way you're coming in under $75,000, when you're at that closing table and you want that deal and desperation justification comes in, immediately we say, can I go without that $25,000 so that I can close this business? But that's money out of your pocket. But in the beginning of the conversation, if you had identified that they only had $50,000 for the project, then you knew at that point, if this was a deal that was not qualified for you, that you need to walk away from, or it is your responsibility to find $25,000 worth of problems that you can make up for in quantifiable ROI. The last thing I'll tell you, when you are at the closing table at that moment in time, if you have done your homework and you've done your job and you've hit all of these qualifications of discovery, when you are sitting at that closing table, you got to woman up. You need to close your mouth, and you need to deliver the request for the commitment on the deal, and you do not say anything else. Negotiation is a game of leverage, and I have watched many women not feel like they have power at that table, and that is ridiculous. You sit there and you deliver it, and that's it. There are no permission questions. Well, I was thinking, well, maybe I was hoping, and perhaps, well, and then if this is too much, just let me know. And I mean, if that price is too high, or if that doesn't look right, I mean, I can see what I can do. And I mean, ultimately, I was just really hoping that this would be okay. And then if it's not, I mean, we can have a conversation. Cut it. You're worth it. To deliver the price and sit there, and it's a game of leverage. And you hold that, and it's in your confidence and what you're delivering to them. And when they come back to you and they ask for a better price, you'd be willing to walk away from that deal. And you remind them of their words, the prospect's words, what you found out in discovery, that that problem is costing them $25,000, and you sit back and you wait. And when they realize you won't budge, that's when you win the deal. I'm sorry, I get a little worked up.
So, you just took us to church. How many of y'all need to have a little amen break? All right, that was, all of it.
Ghosting, I hate it, and it feels like the biggest waste of my time. We work so hard in the sales profession, and I always try to figure out, when I find a pattern, if it's happening multiple times, it's probably preventable. And where I've been able to receive feedback early in my career, anytime that ghosting was becoming a trend, sometimes those people do come back around, or my favorite is when you get ghosted by somebody and then you see them at a networking event. That's amazing. You're like, oh, I am so coming for you right now. And the look on their face is horrifying. And you just wait for the excuses to pour out of their mouth for every reason why it hasn't happened. But if you have an opportunity to go back, or if you have been able to circle back around and find out specific reasons why it happened. So sometimes ghosting happens in our business because we work directly with CEOs. And CEOs are the busiest people, and I am one, so I would agree with that. And I've also ghosted people selling to me. And it's all a lack of qualification of their commitment to executing on the project. It's also what we find is they will go dark because something comes up, there's higher priorities in the business, and sometimes it's truly just because they are running a company and there are other higher priority items than you. So what I've tried to do, some ghosting is avoidable and some is not. With the ghosting that's avoidable, you can uncover this by asking people and understanding what caused it. Typically, it's lack of gaining agreement to getting a decision from your prospect on the front end of the conversation, on the front end of the sales conversation. So let me explain that further. In your very first meeting, you should be gaining agreement that this prospect is going to make a yes or no decision with you at a certain point in time. So if you make that one change just in the very first sales conversation that you have, remember, you sell what you sell every day. They may buy it once in a lifetime. Maybe they buy it every year, but they may buy it once in a lifetime. They are not the professional at buying what you sell. You are the professional at selling what you sell, so help them buy it. And in the beginning, if you set a clear expectation and gain agreement on that, that the way you go about doing business and the way that this process works is that we have a series of meetings, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 3, or even by the end of this one meeting that we have together, you and I get to collectively decide if it makes sense for us to move forward. And when you gain the agreement on that and even give them an out and say, and I'll even take the feedback that you're just not ready yet. What I also do to avoid ghosting is always schedule next steps. So after every meeting, I do not hang up that phone or walk out of that office until I have another date on the calendar. I don't even care what it is for. If we're just having a phone conversation to see if you've had that meeting yet that you just said that you needed to have in order to make a decision, and I will hold them to it, and I get the scheduled time, and I make them say this time will work and whatnot, and I call to confirm the appointment. Very rarely when you go to that extent to get scheduled next steps do they ghost you, but it still happens. I would say having some empathy when your people ghost you, and then bringing in some humor. So don't get mad, don't get frustrated. I don't think they woke up in the morning and said, I'm purposefully ghosting this person today and I'm gonna get them. I really genuinely do think things come up in their lives and they are busy and things happen. Also, what you can do in that situation is just send something humorous. We have found great success when you've been ghosted by sending something funny. And sending a text message or an email or something with a GIF or like a meme or something that catches their attention. There's an old sales trick out there where you send a picture of a filing cabinet and you ask if the filing cabinet has fallen on them and if they need help and you need them to call 911 for them. There are funny things that you can do to get them to respond, but typically sending some sort of humor and just working alongside of them. But get the agreement on the front end, always have scheduled next steps, and you should be able to avoid the ghosting. Ooh, let me add one more thing. And don't ever email a proposal and wait to hear back. Always deliver in person with paperwork backed up in that moment, because you get ghosted a lot on proposals. Okay. As a young company or a smaller company, my big advice is to look bigger than you are, and to figure out how to remove the obstacles of how you compete and where you might lose. As a young company or a small company or as a solopreneur or as a small shop, you may lose because of that. The way that you can look bigger than you are is your brand. Make the investment in your website, in your business cards, in your custom name tag that you had when you're out. Get branded materials. Look bigger than you are. Make the investment there. Secondly, when you go into a meeting, sometimes we feel underqualified and we look at the opportunity and say, oh gosh, that would be really big for us. I don't know. And there's a lot of self-doubt. Prepare. We recently won a $100,000 client. They're in the oil and gas industry. I know nothing about oil and gas. I'm like, what do they sell? I mean, I don't get it. How does our company align with that? But it was the research and it was the due diligence, and it was coming prepared with talk tracks, industry-specific language, knowing I was going to be asked for references, and waiting to the point where I'm like, I don't I came prepared, and I found companies that were similar, that had a similar use case that we had worked with, that I could get a testimonial ahead of time, get it on paper. I also knew I knew the buyer persona. You guys know oil and gas. These people have money. These are big, powerful, rich, white men. Forgive me, but that's who a lot of them are. And I knew if I was going to win that deal, I had to show up as a rich, white, powerful man that day. And that's what I did. And I was prepared. And I used big, bold words. And I was concise. And I brought it. And it was the confidence in that moment that allowed me to get that deal. But I acted way bigger than we were. And I anticipated what the objections were going to be. So play that part. You've heard it, like fake it till you make it. When you're an entrepreneur and you're starting out, so what? I don't care that you're small. I don't care that you've only been doing this 6 months. I don't care that you haven't quite figured out your pricing model yet. Nobody needs to know that stuff but you. You go out. I've had people say, well, what we really want is X. Is that something that you do? Yes. And this is how much it costs. And here's how we implement it. And I just made all of that up, right? So be bigger than you are.